Hey everyone, and Happy New Year! So, to start the new year, we're going to chat a bit about my personal favorite formation, the Morrison Formation. This is a picture I took in the San Rafael Swell in Utah. And when people think of the Morrison Formation, they think of sauropods. They're the biggest megafauna we've had on land ever, so, people get pretty excited. Anyways, one of the big questions people ask is, are there too many sauropods in the Morrison Formation? And it's a valid question. The Morrison is well known for the many dinosaurs it has, including Stegosaurus and Allosaurus, but the sauropods took the world by storm, and can you blame them? You see that tiny person up here? Look how tiny he is compared to them. Anyway, so are there too many? Let's go ahead and list them out. So we have Haplocanthosaurus, possibly 2 species, Marapunosaurus, which was lost, unfortunately. We only had one element and it was lost a long time ago, back during the Bone Wars. Anyway, there's Dislocosaurus, Smetanosaurus, Suacia, Amphicilius, Apatosaurus, 3 species, Atalantosaurus, which is dubious, Brontosaurus, 3 species, Barosaurus, 2 species, Diplodocus, 3 species, Seismosaurus. Some people consider it a species of Diplodocus, which would make there be 4 species of Diplodocus. We're not worried about it for this particular list right now. Then there is Galeomopus, 2 species, Catodocus, Supersaurus, Brachiosaurus, Camarasaurus, which has 5 species, and Dystropheus, however you want to pronounce it. So that's 32 different sauropods. Can you imagine having 32 different elephant species, genuses in the same area? Whew, that's a lot. But if we look at this a little closer, it's not quite what we think. So for starters, if we look here, the Morrison Formation, the Morrison Basin, covers a huge area. That's 1.5 million square kilometers, or 600,000 square miles. It's a lot of area to cover. And this formation not only covers a lot of land, but a lot of time too. Over 10 million years up here. I apologize, my sister's cat is trying to get the cupboard. So 10 million years, 1.5 million square kilometers. That's a lot of area and a lot of time to cover with just 32 sauropods, so maybe it's not so bad. Well, if we break it down by where these dinosaurs are found, and other things like that, we can see that it's not as bad as it seems. So first, we remove the dubious, the unknown, and the lost specimens, because we can't do anything with those. We've either proven that they don't exist, we can't prove they exist, or we're still trying to see if we can find other pieces, and we're not sure what they are. So that removes some of the species and some of the genuses. We can take out 6 of them. Now, that still leaves us with, 26 sauropods? That's still a lot. But then we break it down by where. So there are 7 states that these dinosaurs were found in, and some of them, we can make it real easy. South Dakota only has Barosaurus. That's all they've got. New Mexico only has Seismosaurus, which, incidentally, I grew up near, hearing about it when they found it and all of that, and then I got to go sleep under the skeleton at the museum that I worked at in Montana, because the guy who ran that museum, or built that museum, was on that dig when they found that dinosaur. So, fun fact. Anyway, and then Montana and Oklahoma only have 2. Oklahoma has Barosaurus and Camarasaurus supremus, and Montana has Suacia and Camarasaurus grandis. So that's already making it so much better. We're seeing that they only have 1 to 2 sauropods in their area. However, when we get to Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah, it gets a little more complicated. Utah has 8 sauropods, Colorado has 12, and Wyoming has 14. So, that narrowed it down a little bit. But we need to break it down even further, which means we need to look at the rocks. So the Morrison Formation is a huge formation. Couple kilometers thick in some areas. Now, for Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah, what we're going to do is we're going to break them up into members, and there's only going to be 3 members. Don't worry about what that means right now. We'll talk about it in a later post. But what we need to know is Tidwell, Saltwash, and Brushy Basin member. Now, Brushy Basin is the one everyone's pretty much familiar with. It's all the colorful muds that we find a lot of our dinosaurs from the Jurassic in. That's where the wall in Dinosaur National Monument is found. So we're pretty familiar with that one. The Tidwell and the Saltwash are primarily sandstone members, and they're older. So basically all you have to know is that the Tidwell is the oldest, Brushy Basin is the youngest, Saltwash is in the middle. Now, when we break it down that way, we have in Utah 2 sauropods that live in the Brushy Basin. One that kind of crossed the Brushy Basin Saltwash line. We have one that lived in just the Saltwash, and then one that just lived in the Tidwell. So that breaks it down real nice. And we can see that they lived quite separate from each other. And they're found in different sites too. Just to note that. Same with Wyoming and Colorado, there's multiple sites. So when we go to Colorado, we have 2 that lived only in the very latest of the Brushy Basin, so very top. 6 that lived kind of in the middle. 1 that lived in the lower Brushy Basin and crossed that line again into the Saltwash. We had 1 that lived in the Saltwash, and then 1 that lived in the Tidwell. Now in Wyoming, we don't find the Tidwell, but we do have 3 that lived in the Saltwash, 1 that crossed the line, 1 that only lived in the lower Brushy Basin, 5 that lived kind of in the middle of the Brushy Basin, and 1 that lived in the Brushy Basin, but might also have not lived in the Brushy Basin. It might have actually been the Cretaceous. Is that Wyoming? Yes. The problem is that we have some other formations like the Cedar Mountain Formation, which are almost identical to the Morrison, so it makes it really hard. We gotta look for real subtle clues. So when we break it down by numbers, it's not too bad. And then we have to talk about the environment. So a lot of what we know about the Morrison Formation comes from the Colorado Plateau because geologists and paleontologists love it, and they always talk about Lake Tuadiche. That is not a good indicator. Lake Tuadiche was a saline lake like the Great Salt Lake here. It's inhospitable for animals. And guess what? We don't find animals anywhere near Lake Tuadiche. There are no sites there. No sites around them because nothing could live there. So while this would have been our seasonally dry, semi-arid crapland, nothing was living there. Everything was living in forests, lush, wet forests. The site I work at, there are petrified trees everywhere. There are petrified cycads everywhere. There was plenty for these guys to eat. And on top of having these lush, wet forests, we have niche partitioning. Each of these different sauropods would be eating it from a different layer, so they're not competing with each other. So, in conclusion, no, there aren't too many sauropods. The environment can sustain them. We know they were prolific because we find so many. We're not finding them in huge groups. The wall is an exception. That's a flood deposit, so it's throwing everything off. Most of the time we only find 1 or 2 individuals together, that kind of thing. We find more footprints together than we do actual skeletons, so no, there aren't too many, and the Morrison is awesome, and I can't wait to talk more about it this month.